He announced his resignation in a half an hour from now.
People will be at television sets and radios tonight to hear what the president has to say.
This is the political crime story of the century.
In just a moment now, the President of the United States will begin his speech, perhaps his last speech from the White House.
He always saw enemies. He always saw people in the shadows. And his motto, I believe, was do unto others before they have a chance to do unto you.
That's enough.
There was an obsession with leaks. You don't blame the leaks when facts come out that are showing wrongdoing.
No, there will be no picture.
This is the funny thing. Had it not been for Watergate, I think this man could have gone down in history as one of the more significant presidents in the history of this country.
Out. You don't have to stay, do you?
We were witnessing the implosion of an American presidency.
The President has taken his place at the table in the White House where he's going to speak. Here now, the next picture will be the President of the United States.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
It was the scandal that took down a president, a plot of lies, espionage, and secret dealings that shattered how the nation viewed their presidency and the truth. It all started here, the now infamous Watergate office building, when police were called to investigate a strange break-in.
I was a sergeant assigned to the people on the street, called us the bum squad.
What I looked like in 1972 was like a junior Charles Manson.
Georgetown, Friday night going into Saturday is always crazy back then.
On June 17, 1972, there was a break-in at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in the Watergate office complex. This was the start of what would be the political crime of the century.
At the center of it all were two men, G. Gordon Liddy, an ex-FBI agent who had been hired by President Nixon's campaign to run covert operations. He recruited James McCord, the security chief of the committee to re-elect the president.
And the plan was to get negative information about the potential nominee of the Democratic Party. But how are you going to get the negative information? A lot of people would say breaking into the Democratic National Committee was way out, off the charts. Yes, but not that far off.
McCord would go into the Watergate building and put in tapes in the door.
It was taped, so it would not lock.
The hero of that night was a man named Frank Wills. Frank Wills was the security guard at the Watergate office building.
You found the door taped once, and you took the tape off. And then you found it taped the second time.
It was something that told me that you should check, not only check the door, but that you call the police.
About 1:52 in the morning, the call comes out for an alleged burglary at the Watergate Hotel. I just kind of blinked my eyes. Yeah, we'll take the call. I had on a old funky golf cap. I think I had just like a T-shirt underneath, trying to give me the image I wasn't a police officer.
If a uniformed car had answered that call, it could have been a whole different ballgame.
There's a lookout, Alfred Baldwin, who's supposed to warn the burglars if there's trouble. The police unit that responds to the call, they're not dressed like police officers. So Baldwin doesn't even notice them.
Our adrenaline is pumped. We get to this room here. I kick the door open.
I pulled my revolver.
Baldwin was supposed to be the lookout across the street.
He was watching a show called Attack of the Puppet People. By the time Alfred Baldwin had notified them, it was too late, and they had to run and hide like rats. We're rolling down this hallway, checking the offices on both sides of the hallways, make sure that nobody's hiding from behind us. I was startled by an arm hitting next to the glass on the petition. It scared the living bejesus out of me. I screamed something to the effect, come out with your hands up or I'm gonna blow your head off. 10 hands went up, and they came out, and that's where the arrest occurred, right here. The 5 burglars that were arrested inside the DNC, McCord, Barker, Sturgis, Martinez, and Gonzalez. This was not your normal, typical burglary. There was bugging devices, tear gas pens, many rolls of film, locksmith tools, thousands of dollars in $100 bills consecutively ordered.
Who goes into the Democratic National Committee looking for money or looking for jewels? No, you go looking for political information. And who wants that? Why, your opponent, naturally.
People weren't saying, oh my God, this is clearly going to implicate Richard Nixon. It just seemed bizarre. It would take some enterprising young journalists to ferret out the importance of the story.
Woodward and Bernstein were assigned to this burglary just as a matter of routine.
Editors kind of said, we got this strange burglary.
They were young reporters trying to make their way up the ladder in the Washington Post.
When you talk about the people who made a difference when it came to Watergate, you talk about Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
They sent me to the courthouse where the 5 burglars caught in the Democratic headquarters were being arraigned. The judge asked the leader, James McCord, where did you work? And McCord went, CIA. It was stunning.
And they discovered that McCord was a security chief for the committee to re-elect the president. Well, okay, folks, this was a political break-in.
There was a notebook belonging to one of the burglars that had the name in it, H. Hunt W. House. And of course, it turned out to be Howard Hunt, who had worked for the CIA, who had been hired at the White House really to undertake dirty tricks.
You knew that this smoke that was billowing up from the Oval Office, there had to be some fire there.
It's like the Dylan song, it don't take a weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
Presidential Press Secretary Ron Ziegler called it a third-rate burglary attempt and said it was nothing the president would ever be concerned with.
Richard Nixon is obstructing justice from the beginning. But what would be known as the smoking gun was when he approves a plan to use the CIA to blunt an FBI investigation into the money that the burglars had. It's clear in the conversation this is being done for political purposes, basically to save the skin of the White House, and the president says he approves it.
Woodward and Bernstein had scores of sources, but there was one source that was special. A guy really high up. He was known as Deep Throat.
We would learn years later that Deep Throat was Mark Felt, number 2 at the FBI.
He was in the perfect position to understand what was coming into the investigation, as well as what he could observe maybe from above the investigation.
I want to talk about Watergate.
We're not going to talk about that subject.
All the president's men created a sense of danger. They were constantly risking things by trying to find out the truth.
You can trust me, you know that.
The other thing the movie did was create that expression, follow the money.
Just follow the money.
And put it into American culture.
Deep Throat made it clear that the money was important, that there was a trail to follow. And Carl established that a $25,000 check had actually gone into the bank account of one of the Watergate burglars.
The $25,000 check linked contributions to President Nixon's re-election campaign to the slush fund used to pay the burglars who broke into the Watergate office complex.
I said, oh my God. This now establishes an undeniable connection between the committee for Nixon's re-election and the burglars.
John Mitchell was the Attorney General. He was a Nixon loyalist.
The highest law enforcement officer in America controlled a secret fund that paid for undercover activities against Nixon's political opponents. Bradley said they're about to call the Attorney General of the United States a crook. There's never been a story like this in our history. And we took a deep breath and said, yeah.
ABC News has projected that Richard Nixon has in fact been re-elected to the presidency to a second term. So the question now, I suppose, is how big will Mr. Nixon win?
It was a giant landslide. There was virtually no reaction to the stories we did. And it was a way of saying, Watergate? Who cares?
And whatever happened to Watergate? I don't know. Apparently nothing.
They've got a trial of the accused in that case, and that's going to be tried in due course, and I think that's probably the end of the story.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
By definition.
Exactly.
I admire Richard Nixon for the many great things he has done for the people of America and the people of the world. I have no doubts whatever that the final analysis of history will be that few American presidents did more for the solid advancement of world peace than did Richard Nixon. But the most important aspect of our entire system of government is equal justice under the law. The principle that no person, whether he be rich or poor, black or white, ordinary citizen or president, is above the law. Cover-up of criminal activity and misuse of federal agencies can neither be condoned nor tolerated. And as long as we adhere as a nation to this principle, our nation will remain great and strong. I have considered all of the evidence to the best of my ability. When the roll is called in the House of Representatives, I will vote aye on impeachment Article 1. In addition, the new evidence made available yesterday has considerable bearing on my decision concerning Article 2, a decision which I have not yet finalized.
Senator, can you tell us whether it's your considered opinion that President Nixon should now resign from office for the good of the country?
I think we've arrived at a point where both the national interest and his own interest will best be served by resigning. It's not just his enemies who feel that way. Many of his best friends, and I consider myself one of them, believe now that this would be the most appropriate course. Needless to say, this would be an awesome, very difficult decision for him to reach. But I believe that he will see it that way too.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shape the history of this nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest. In all the decisions I have made in my public life, I have always tried to do what was best for the nation. Throughout the long and difficult period of Watergate, I have felt it was my duty to persevere, to make every possible effort to complete the term of office to which you elected me. In the past few days, however, it has become evident to me that I no longer have a strong enough political base in the Congress to justify continuing that effort. As long as there was such a base, I felt strongly that it was necessary to see the constitutional process through to its conclusion, that to do otherwise would be unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberately difficult process and a dangerously destabilizing precedent for the future. But with the disappearance of that base, I now believe that the constitutional purpose has been served, and there is no longer a need for the process to be prolonged. I would have preferred to carry through to the finish, whatever the personal agony it would have involved. And my family unanimously urged me to do so. But the interests of the nation must always come before any personal considerations. From the discussions I have had with congressional and other leaders, I have concluded that because of the Watergate matter, I might not have the support of the Congress that I would consider necessary to back the very difficult decisions and carry out the duties of this office in the way the interests of the nation will require. I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad, to continue to fight through the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and the Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office. As I recall the high hopes for America with which we began this second term, I feel a great sadness that I will not be here in this office working on your behalf to achieve those hopes in the next 2.5 years. But in turning over direction of the government to Vice President Ford, I know, as I told the nation when I nominated him for that office 10 months ago, that the leadership of America will be in good hands. In passing this office to the Vice President, I also do so with a profound sense of the weight of responsibility that will fall on his shoulders tomorrow, and therefore of the understanding, the patience, the cooperation he will need from all Americans. As he assumes that responsibility, he will deserve the help and the support of all of us. As we look to the future, the first essential is to begin healing the wounds of this nation, to put the bitterness and divisions of the recent past behind us, and to rediscover those shared ideals that lie at the heart of our strength and unity as a great and as a free people. By taking this action, I hope that I will have hastened the start of that process of healing which is so desperately needed in America. I regret deeply any injuries that may have been done in the course of the events that led to this decision. I would say only that if some of my judgments were wrong, and some were wrong, they were made in what I believed at the time to be the best interest of the nation. To those who have stood with me during these past difficult months, to my family, my friends, to many others who joined in supporting my cause because they believed it was right, I will be eternally grateful for your support. And to those who have not felt able to give me your support, let me say, I leave with no bitterness toward those who have opposed me. Because all of us in the final analysis have been concerned with the good of the country, however our judgments might differ. So let us all now join together in affirming that common commitment and in helping our new president succeed for the benefit of all Americans. I shall leave this office with regret at not completing my term, but with gratitude for the privilege of serving as your president for the past 5.5 years. These years have been a momentous time in the history of our nation and the world. They have been a time of achievement in which we can all be proud, achievements that represent the shared efforts of the administration, the Congress, and the people. But the challenges ahead are equally great, and they too will require the support and the efforts of the Congress and the people working in cooperation with the new administration. We have ended America's longest war, but in the work of securing a lasting peace in the world, the goals ahead are even more far-reaching and more difficult. We must complete a structure of peace so that it will be said of this generation, our generation of Americans, by the people of all nations, not only that we ended one war, but that we prevented future wars. We have unlocked the doors that for a quarter of a century stood between the United States and the People's Republic of China. We must now ensure that the 1/4 of the world's people who live in the People's Republic of China will be and remain not our enemies, but our friends. In the Middle East, 100 million people in the Arab countries, many of whom have considered us their enemy for nearly 20 years, now look on us as their friends. We must continue to build on that friendship so that peace can settle at last over the Middle East, and so that the cradle of civilization will not become its grave. Together with the Soviet Union, we have made the crucial breakthroughs that have begun the process of limiting nuclear arms. But we must set as our goal not just limiting, but reducing and finally destroying these terrible weapons so that they cannot destroy civilization, and so that the threat of nuclear war will no longer hang over the world and the people. We have opened a new relation with the Soviet Union. We must continue to develop and expand that new relationship so that the two strongest nations of the world will live together in cooperation rather than confrontation. Around the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, there are millions of people who live in terrible poverty, even starvation. We must keep as our goal turning away from production for war and expanding production for peace, so that people everywhere on this earth can at last look forward in their children's time, if not in our own time, to having the necessities for a decent life. Here in America, we are fortunate that most of our people have not only the blessings of liberty, but also the means to live full and good, and by the world's standards, even abundant lives. We must press on, however, toward a goal not only of more and better jobs, but of full opportunity for every American. And of what we are striving so hard right now to achieve, prosperity without inflation. For more than a quarter of a century in public life, I have shared in the turbulent history of this era. I have fought for what I believed in. I have tried, to the best of my ability, to discharge those duties and meet those responsibilities that were entrusted to me. Sometimes I have succeeded, and sometimes I have failed. But always, I have taken heart from what Theodore Roosevelt once said about the man in the arena whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is not effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deed, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumphs of high achievements, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. I pledge to you tonight that as long as I have a breath of life in my body, I shall continue in that spirit. I shall continue to work for the great causes to which I have been dedicated throughout my years as a congressman, a senator, vice president, and president. the cause of peace, not just for America, but among all nations, prosperity, justice, and opportunity for all of our people. There is one cause, above all, to which I have been devoted and to which I shall always be devoted for as long as I live. When I first took the oath of office as president 5.5 years ago, I made this sacred commitment to consecrate my office, my energies, and all the wisdom I can summon to the cause of peace among nations. I've done my very best in all the days since to be true to that pledge. As a result of these efforts, I am confident that the world is a safer place today, not only for the people of America, but for the people of all nations. And that all of our children have a better chance than before of living in peace rather than dying in war. This, more than anything, is what I hoped to achieve when I sought the presidency. This, more than anything, is what I hope will be my legacy to you, to our country, as I leave the presidency. To have served in this office is to have felt a very personal sense of kinship with each and every American. In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
Mr. Ford, you stated that the theory on which you pardoned Richard Nixon was that he had suffered enough. And I'm interested in that theory because the logical consequence of that is that somebody who resigns in the face of virtually certain impeachment, or somebody who is impeached, should not be punished, because the impeachment or the resignation in face of impeachment is punishment enough. And I wondered whether anybody had brought to your attention the fact that the Constitution specifically states that even though somebody is impeached, that person shall nonetheless be liable to punishment according to law.
Mrs. Holtzman, I was fully cognizant of the fact that the President, on resignation, was accountable for any criminal charges. But I would like to say that the reason I gave the pardon was not as to Mr. Nixon himself. I repeat, and I repeat with emphasis, the purpose of the pardon was to try and get the United States, the Congress, the President, and the American people focusing on the serious problems we have both at home and abroad. And I was absolutely convinced then, as I am now, that if we had had this series, an indictment, a trial, a conviction, and anything else that transpired after that, that the attention of the President, the Congress, and the American people would have been diverted from the problems that we have to solve. And that was the principal reason for my granting of the pardon.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, just before we adjourn this hearing, I again would like to commend the President and thank him for coming. I think, Mr. President, that you have probably opened a new era between the executive and the legislative departments, and I am very happy for it.
Mr. Chairman, I want to express to you and to the other members of the committee or subcommittee my appreciation for the fine manner and I think the fair way in which this meeting was held this morning. I felt that it was absolutely essential because I'm the only one who could explain the background and the decision-making process. And I hope as I said in my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, that have at least cleared the air so that most Americans will understand what was done and why it was done. And again, I trust that all of us can get back to the job of trying to solve our problems both at home and abroad. I thank you very, very much.